We want to address a very important issue facing the Islamic challenge. But as Christians, we don't just want to face an Islamic challenge in any way. We want to face challenges biblically, and that can be difficult to get our minds around in a world where people are having their heads chopped off, women are being brutally raped, Christians are being violently subjugated, forced to pay jizya or start running because they'll be killed. So there are lots of things going on in the world, and we want to try and figure out biblical principles that can help us understand how we should respond to this challenge. And just clarify, when I refer to the Islamic challenge, Islam is a challenge to Christians in various ways. So we might want to call this responding to Islamic challenges. So we're going to look at three different ways Islam challenges Christians and some biblical principles for responding so that we don't get far away from what the Bible teaches. The first challenge that we could draw attention to is that Islam contradicts the core teachings of the gospel. So this is a religious challenge to some of the core theological teachings of the gospel. When the apostles went out and preached the gospel that they took from Jesus, they tended to focus on a couple of important issues. One, that Jesus died on the cross for sins, that he rose from the dead, and that he is Lord, and therefore people need to submit to him. Islam contradicts all three of those fundamental core teachings of the Christian gospel. So let me read a couple of passages to you. Chapter 6, verse 164 of the Quran. Say, what? Shall I seek a Lord other than Allah? And he is the Lord of all things, and no soul earns evil but against itself, and no bearer of burden shall bear the burden of another. Then to your Lord is your return, so he will inform you of that in which you differed. So no bearer of burden shall bear the burden of another, according to the Quran. No bearer of burden shall bear the burden of another. And Muslims interpret this to mean that no one can pay for the sins of another. So the fundamental core teaching of the gospel, that Jesus died on the cross for the sins of others, is, according to Islam, false. And Muslims will be raised all of their lives to believe this. Chapter 4, verses 157 to 158. They said, they being the Jews here, they said in boast, we killed Christ Jesus, the son of Mary, the messenger of Allah. But they killed him not, nor crucified him, but so it was made to appear to them. And those who differ therein are full of doubts, with no certain knowledge, but only conjecture to follow. For of a surety they killed him not. Nay, Allah raised him up unto himself, and Allah is exalted in power, wise. So, according to the Quran, Jesus didn't even die on the cross. If he never died, he obviously couldn't have died for sins, and even if he had died on the cross, no bearer of burden shall bear the burden of another, so it wouldn't be for the sins of others. So you can see how Islam is working to undermining the core teachings of the Christian gospel. Chapter 5, verse 116 of the Quran. And remember when Allah will say on the day of resurrection, O Jesus, son of Mary, did you say unto men, worship me and my mother as two gods besides Allah? He will say, glory be to you. It was not for me to say what I had no right to say. Had I said such a thing, you would surely have known it. Think about this. This is the closest that Islam gets to defining the doctrine of the Trinity. And when Allah tries to define the doctrine of the Trinity, it's Allah, Jesus, and Mary working together as three separate deities. And according to Islam, that's what the doctrine of the Trinity is. No group, no Christian group, whether orthodox or heretical, has ever taught that as the doctrine of the Trinity. So we have to wonder what Allah is responding to here. The important takeaway, though, for purposes of challenging the gospel, is that this, of course, is denying the deity of Christ. It's denying the Trinity, and that it's doing so by misrepresenting what Christians actually believe. And so there's a challenge of, one, Islam is denying Christian doctrine, but two, Islam is misrepresenting that doctrine. So how do we respond to this sort of challenge biblically? How do we respond to these objections to Christianity, to this undermining of the core teachings of the Christian gospel? Well, this is the role of apologetics in Christianity. You respond to arguments against Christianity by refuting those arguments and showing that the Christian doctrines are true. And this is found directly in the Bible, a command to be able to give an answer to objections to our faith. 1 Peter 3:15. But sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. This is Peter, who's a fisherman. He's not a brilliant scholar, but he's telling Christians you need to be able to answer objections to Christianity. And so when Islam contradicts those teachings of the gospel, this sort of challenge would be faced by Christians by apologetics, through learning to defend the core teachings of the gospel. And what's interesting is that the most common objections you will hear to Christianity by Muslims are shockingly easy to answer. You could study for a day or two and you would be absolutely fine in, I'd say, 98% of the encounters you'll ever have with Muslims. You can very easily answer the sorts of objections that Muslims raise. Let me give you a couple of examples. These are three of the most common objections you will ever hear from Muslims. Where did Jesus say, "I am God, worship me"? I'm sure if you talk to Muslims, you've heard this over and over again. How can God die? What sense does it make for you Christians to believe that Jesus is God when he died? How's that possible? And the Bible has been corrupted. These would be the three most common objections you will hear from Muslims. And think about how easy it is to respond to these. Where did Jesus say, "I am God, worship me"? Now you can answer this in all kinds of ways. But if you're looking for just a very simple argument that you can use, one of the things you can do is point out that Jesus uses titles and names for himself, which according to the Quran, only God can use, and according to the Bible in the Old Testament, only Yahweh can use. So according to the Quran, for instance, chapter 57, verse 3 of the Quran, Allah says that he is the first and the last. He's the first because nothing comes before him. He's the last because nothing can come after him. Yahweh calls himself the same thing in the book of Isaiah. He calls himself the first and the last. So Allah is the first and the last according to Islam. Yahweh is the first and the last according to the Bible. And so imagine our surprise when we open the Bible and we would read, let's go to the first chapter of the book of Revelations. John sees an appearance of something that really scares him. Verse 17 of chapter 1. He says, "When I saw him, I fell at his feet like a dead man, and he placed his right hand on me, saying, 'Do not be afraid, I am the first and the last.'" Notice, I am the first and the last. Well, according to the Quran, which calls Allah the first and the last, and according to the Old Testament, the book of Isaiah, which calls Yahweh the first and the last, who's talking here if he's claiming to be the first and the last? Well, this must be God, right? Let's keep reading. "Do not be afraid, I am the first and the last, and the living one, and I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and of Hades." Well, the first and the last here says that he died. When did Allah die? When did Yahweh die? You see, what's interesting is this is Jesus talking. Jesus applies to himself a name which, according to both the Quran and the Bible, only God can use of himself. So where did Jesus claim to be God? He does this in all kinds of ways. We're just giving one quick example to give you an idea of how apologetics would work. Notice, as a Muslim, you have to believe that Allah is the first and the last. That's a title he gives to himself. Well, here you have in the Bible Jesus claiming that about himself. And so it's certainly not something that Muslims should ignore. So that sort of thing, notice this doesn't take tons of training or years of practice. You could learn a couple of verses and you can answer the Muslim effectively. What about how can God die? How can God die? Think about this. We cover this a lot because it's such a common objection. But think about how simple this is to answer. You can see why a Muslim would object here. God is eternal and unchanging, and he's omnipotent. What sense does it make to say He died. Who would be running the universe? That's the sort of thinking, so you can see why Muslims would object to this. But what's interesting is you can explain to a Muslim so that he at least understands what we're claiming by pointing out what Islam teaches about the Quran. Not because we believe the Quran, but just because this is a helpful example because there's a parallel in Islam. So think about this. This is a copy of the Quran. According to Islam, the Quran is Allah's eternal word. It has no beginning. It is eternal with Allah. It has no beginning. It cannot be corrupted. It cannot be destroyed. But think about this. I have a copy of the Quran here. This Quran had a beginning. It will eventually fall apart because it's made of paper and glue and ink. Someone could destroy it at any time if they wanted because it's made of paper and glue and ink. In fact, people have burned the Quran before. There were riots over burning the Quran. But think about this. If the Quran is eternal and unchanging and incorruptible, cannot be destroyed, had no beginning, what sense does it make to say the Quran, this Quran, had a beginning and it can be destroyed? What sense does that make? Well, the answer, according to Islamic theology, is that the Quran has two natures. It is the divine word of Allah, but when it enters our world, it has to take the form of a physical form made of paper and glue and ink or written on someone's heart. So it has to have a physical form in our world. Even though the eternal Quran, Allah's eternal word, cannot be changed, it has no beginning, it cannot be destroyed. When it enters our world in a physical form, the physical nature of the Quran does have a beginning, it will have an end, it can be destroyed, it can fall apart. So according to Islam, there's no contradiction between something being eternal and unchanging and incorruptible, according to one of its natures, but be physical and changeable and have a beginning and be corruptible in a different sense because it has a different nature. So if that's true of the Quran, if the Quran can be both eternal and finite, why would a Muslim say that that's a huge problem for Christians who say that the eternal Word of God, Jesus, in John 1:1, the Word was with God and the Word was God, but the Word entered creation, took on a physical nature. Why would they say that's a contradiction? It can't be a contradiction. If it is a contradiction, then Islam is false because the Quran would have a similar contradiction. So notice, you don't need to have any deep sort of training to answer that objection. You just need to know a little bit about what Muslims believe about the Quran, and I just shared what that was, and you can stop the Muslim from using one of the most common objections they use against Christianity. Number 3, the Bible has been corrupted. So the Bible has been corrupted. Any Muslim will tell you that the Bible has been corrupted. Why do they say this? Well, there's a good reason, namely that according to Islam, according to the Quran, Allah inspired the Torah and the Gospel, the scriptures of the Jews and the scriptures of the Christians. This is chapter 3, verses 3 through 4. It says that Allah inspired the Torah and the Gospel. But we open the Torah and the Gospel today, they certainly don't line up with Islam. They say some very different things. So obviously Muslims have to say that the Torah and the Gospel were corrupted. Here you can point out to a Muslim that as a Muslim, he's not really allowed to use this response because he's contradicting the Quran. Chapter 5, verse 47 of the Quran. Let the people of the Gospel judge by what Allah hath revealed therein. If any do fail to judge by the light of what Allah hath revealed, they are no better than those who rebel. Allah commands Christians to judge by the gospel. This is not first century Christians. This is addressing Christians during the time of Muhammad. So this is after Christianity's been here for 6 centuries. 6 centuries. Allah tells Christians, judge by the gospel. Well, that only makes sense if Christians have the gospel. So if Allah tells us to judge by the gospel, how can a Muslim say, hey, your book's been corrupted? Is Allah telling us to judge by a corrupt book? What kind of God would tell us to judge by a book that he knows has been corrupted? So just pointing the Muslim to what the Quran says, you can say, look, you're not telling me what your religion actually teaches. One more verse, and there are tons of these, but we'll just look at one more. Chapter 18, verse 27 of the Quran, Allah says, and recite what has been revealed to you of the book of your Lord. There is none who can alter his words, and you shall not find any refuge besides him. So Allah brags that no one can alter his words. And here Muslims will say, well, this is just talking about the Quran. He doesn't say he's just talking about the Quran. He doesn't say no one can change the Quran. He says no one can change his words. But wait a minute, according to the Quran, the Torah and the Gospel are Allah's words. So can those be corrupted by man according to the Quran? The answer is no. So when a Muslim tells you the Bible's been corrupted, you can say, look, you better be careful because you might be committing apostasy right now by contradicting what your own God says in the Quran. And so you can block these sorts of objections very easily by knowing one or two verses of the Quran. And this is the role of apologetics. And I want to stress, this isn't just for apologists. This isn't just for debaters. This is for you. You are commanded in 1 Peter 3:15 to be able to respond, not to every single possible objection, but when it comes to the core teachings of the gospel, you should be able to give a defense. If you're not prepared right now, that's fine, but you should make an effort to learn some responses, especially when we know what the main objections to Christianity from Muslims are. And you just went through the main three. How difficult were those objections to answer? Not very, I wouldn't think. So that's one challenge, a challenge to Christian doctrine, and the response is apologetics. Challenge number two would be that Islam places massive barriers between Muslims and the gospel. I grew up as an atheist. I eventually became a Christian. It wasn't a big deal for my family. I could have told them I converted to Martian Buddhism. It wouldn't have been a huge issue. Many Muslims are in a completely different situation where if they leave Islam and convert to another religion, it can have devastating consequences in their family, maybe even for their lives. And Islam presents this challenge in a couple of different ways. One, according to Islam, the worst possible sin you can commit, the absolute unforgivable sin, if you have not repented of this, you are guaranteed a place in hell. Allah will not forgive it, is shirk. This is associating a partner with Allah. So calling Jesus Lord, which is a core teaching of the gospel, is, according to Islam, the worst possible sin. So when you preach the gospel to a Muslim, you say, hey, Jesus is Lord, that Muslim has been told all his life or all her life that what you're saying that this Muslim needs to believe is the worst possible sin anyone could ever commit. So that can have a huge psychological and spiritual impact on a person. Also, if a Muslim converts to Christianity, if you're successful and the Muslim hears the message and then believes it, this can just absolutely destroy the Muslim's family. His entire social network can be destroyed. And that is a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure telling someone, believe this message that is going to set your family and all your friends against you for the rest of your life, destroying your entire framework in life. That can be very difficult. But there's a third one, and that is that according to Islam, the penalty for apostasy is death. It doesn't get carried out much in the West, but as things get more and more radical in the world, as a person who leaves Islam and converts to Christianity, you constantly have to be looking over your shoulder that maybe one day someone is going to carry out that penalty. So believing in Christianity, according to Islam, would be the unforgivable sin because you say that Jesus is Lord. You have to give up your family if you become a Christian, and you could eventually be killed if you become a Christian. These are massive barriers for lots of people to even take in what the gospel message is. So what's the Christian response here? Well, fortunately, we have governments here in the West that aren't going to carry out these sorts of penalties and that will punish people for carrying out, killing apostates and so on. But there's something else biblically that Christians can do to respond to this challenge. And it's in Mark. I have it here. It's in Mark chapter 10, verses 29 to 30. Jesus said, "Truly I say to you, there is no one who has left house or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or farms for my sake and for the gospel's sake, but that he will receive 100 times as much now in the present age, houses and brothers and sisters and mothers and children and farms, along with persecutions, and in the age to come, eternal life." Notice what Jesus says, because it's a similar situation that Christians are dealing with in the first century, namely that converting to Christianity will often get you into trouble with your own family, could get you killed. Jesus says, yes, you may have to give up a lot to follow me, but if you do, you're going to get much more. Parents, family, friends, and so on. Why? How is that? Because you have the Christian community, right? You have the Christian community. If your family is going to abandon you, don't worry, you have a Christian family, which is much bigger than the family that may abandon you. And this is something that Christians need to take seriously, not just thinking, being on the receiving end of this, where, hey, if I give something up, well, I can get more. But on the giving end of this, namely that Christians need to make it known to the world. Look, if you're a Muslim man or a Muslim woman, and your family is going to abandon you, don't worry about it. We will take care of you. Christians need to have a kind of open door policy. If your family's going to kick you out for leaving Islam, we will take care of you. The Christian community will take care of you. That doesn't do away with a lot of the pressure that Muslims are under. Again, they're told that this is the unforgivable sin. Notice, responding to the idea that believing in Jesus is the unforgivable sin, that would be part of apologetics. But apart from the apologetics issue, once you've dealt with the apologetics issue, showing that Jesus is Lord, because that's what he claimed to be, and he's the one who rose from the dead, you'd have the other issue of, it can be very difficult for a young woman who might not have a lot of options in life to give up her family when she doesn't know what she'll do. Those kinds of people need to understand that they will have a much broader family in the Christian church than they ever had at home, and that can help them. So that's a different sort of response, but a biblical response to a different kind of challenge that Islam poses. And finally, the third challenge that we want to look at is that Islam calls for the global implementation of Sharia. Islam doesn't say, hey, just get a little piece of land and hold on to it. Islam strives for global implementation of Sharia. Let me read two passages from Musnad Ahmed. The Prophet of Allah said, "The whole earth has been shown to me until I saw the east of the east and the west of the west, and I saw the authority of Islam ruled all that I saw." This is Muhammad saying that he has a prophecy that Islam is going to dominate the entire world. One more. Muhammad said, "Bring glad tidings to this ummah." This is the body of Muslims. "She will have the power, the pride, the deen, the victory, and the authority on earth. So he who worked to reap the rewards in this life rather than in the hereafter, he would have no reward in the hereafter." So if you just want your rewards in this life, you're not going to have reward in the hereafter. But if you strive for the authority of Islam in this world, then you have the reward in the hereafter. So we have an ideology that calls for the subjugation of everyone. If you're a pagan or polytheist, an atheist or something, your only options are convert to Islam or die. You got to do one or the other if you're in an area that is controlled by Sharia. If you're Christians or Jews, some of the people of the book, you have a third option, which is to pay the jizya. You pay tribute money to Muslims, and there are all kinds of requirements on you. You are not allowed to preach the gospel and so on. But this is what Islam calls for. This is what Islam commands. And that can be a huge challenge because we don't want to live under Sharia. We want to be free to preach the gospel. And so what would be a biblical response to an ideology that calls for the global implementation of Sharia? Well, apologetics can play a role here as well, because you can show Muslims that Islam isn't the truth, and therefore that they shouldn't be striving for the global implementation of Sharia. But as far as Muslims who are actually carrying this out, you even have a biblical principle here. So I'm going to read a short passage from Acts chapter 25. This is when Paul is going through his series of jailings and trials, when people are trying to get him to get him sentenced, to punish him for causing a problem in Jerusalem. Paul says in Acts chapter 25, and I'll begin at verse 7, "After Paul arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many and serious charges against him, which they could not prove. while Paul said in his own defense, I have committed no offense either against the law of the Jews or against the temple or against Caesar. But Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me on these charges? But Paul said, I am standing before Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to be tried. I have done no wrong to the Jews, as you also very well know. If then I am a wrongdoer, and I have committed anything worthy of death, I do not refuse to die. But if none of those things is true, of which these men accuse me, no one can hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. Now think about what Paul just did there. A lot of Jews were upset that Paul is preaching. And the local Roman leader sees that the Jewish population would like to bring Paul up on charges, get him to Jerusalem where they can kill him along the way. He wants to do them a favor. He wants to do them a favor because he wants to be on good terms with this. So he's kind of willing to let Paul go and be killed along the way. Paul's response is, look, if I've done something for which I deserve to die, I will gladly die. But if I haven't done anything wrong, you have no right. You have no right to punish me for something I have not done. I appeal to Caesar. So Paul calls on his government to protect him and to protect his rights from people who would want to hurt him and persecute him. Well, if the Apostle Paul can call on his government to do the right thing and to protect an innocent man from people who want to kill him, obviously we can do the same situation. We can call on our government and on our leaders and demand that they do the right thing. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to obey. The Romans ultimately did not do the right thing. Paul was eventually beheaded for preaching. But that doesn't stop us from calling on leaders and telling our leaders, look, you've been put here. You have been given authority by God to do the right thing in this world. You need to do it because, once they have the authority, they can do all kinds of things. They can do all kinds of evil things. But we're here to say, look, you need to do the right thing. And so it's similar to evangelism where you tell a person, hey, you're created by God, you live in God's world, you need to do what God says. You can do sort of the same thing on a larger scale with a government. You are put here by God to do the right thing, you need to do it. And this would include protecting oppressed peoples, especially people that are being horribly mistreated by groups like ISIS or Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab or the Taliban. So we have biblical principles for different challenges. If Islam challenges Christian doctrine or Christian theology, we respond with apologetics. If Islam is going to persecute people for converting to Christianity, we need to have open arms and help those people know that they have a bigger family waiting for them. And as far as Islam causing global problems, trying to implement Sharia, that's what governments are for. Governments are put here so that they can stand up against these sorts of things. And so these are all biblical principles for responding to the various challenges that Islam brings to us. So I hope this helped, and I would invite you to use these principles in responding to the Islamic challenge.